As sports fans, we've seen pretty much every reason in the book as to why a player would decide to sit out and not play. Whether it's injuries or mental health situations, it's just part of sports. But you know those graphics that sports accounts will post where they're announcing the reasons why a player isn't playing? Well, this one from Bleacher Report about the Matthew Sluka situation is probably the first of its kind. Out for season due to NIL is pretty wild to see because imagine 5 years ago, a starting quarterback on one of the hottest teams in the country decided mid-season that they weren't going to play and that they were transferring elsewhere because they weren't allegedly being paid what they were promised. This new development in the NIL era of college sports is something we've never seen before. My name is Caleb, and if I wasn't being paid what I was promised by an employer, I would also have a problem. Now, this is a multi-sided story that can be dissected from different angles, and we've been getting different perspectives from both Sluka's camp and UNLV themselves. While this is still a developing story, I thought it would be interesting to look at from the top down. Today, we're going to take a brief look at how Sluka and UNLV started the 2024 season, the NIL dispute between Sluka and the school, what precedent this sets moving forward, along with some of my thoughts at the end. With that being said, let's jump in. Now being in the 12-team college football playoff era, this has given way more hope to a group of 5 teams looking to make a playoff bid and compete for a national championship. And even though G5 teams are still going to have that Power 4 conference bias work against them a bit, it's never been a better time to be a good G5 football program. And so far, the 2024 UNLV Rebels look like they could be in the mix to be one of those playoff teams. Starting the year 3-0 with Holy Cross transfer quarterback Matthew Sluka as their starter. Sluka developed into one of the better FCS quarterbacks in the country, going first team All-Patriot League in his junior and senior seasons, while adding a third team All-FCS nod in 2023 as well. While his passing numbers aren't going to jump off the page, his rushing numbers as a quarterback are what really catch the eye. He rushed for over 1,200 yards in his last 2 seasons at Holy Cross and broke the D1 single game rushing record by a quarterback with an insane 330-yard rushing performance versus Lafayette College in 2023. His play style at Holy Cross reminded me of an FCS Tim Tebow. Not a ton of arm talent or the most accurate, but as a dual threat quarterback, he can get away with it in the college game, and overall is a pretty solid football player. And as you know, Sluka would transfer to UNLV for the 2024 season. After winning the starting job late in camp, he'd begin his Rebels career against Houston. He'd only throw for 71 yards in a 27-7 win, but this UNLV team looked like they could be one of the most fun G5 teams to watch under second-year coach Barry Odom. After a dominant 58-point win over Utah Tech, Sluka's third and final game at UNLV this season would be his best as an FBS quarterback. While only throwing the ball 18 times for 86 yards, he'd have one of those iconic quarterback rushing performances that he was known for at Holy Cross, and rush for 124 yards on 19 carries in a 23-20 win over a very solid Kansas team in Lawrence. The Rebels were 3-0 going into their bye week, including 2 Power Conference wins in the first 3 weeks of the season. Things were rolling heading into Mountain West play, and so far, everything seemed to be clicking. While preparing for their first conference game of the season versus Fresno State, their starting quarterback would shock the world with an announcement that is more than likely the first of its kind in college sports. On September 25th, Sluka would thank the UNLV fan base and announced that he was going to transfer and sit out the rest of the 2024 season. His reasoning being that he was not being compensated what he was promised to him during the recruiting process and that would not be fulfilled in the future. This is one of the most bizarre situations during the NIL era, but something like this was eventually going to happen. Without contracts between schools and players, it can get messy, especially when money's involved, and we end up with situations like this. According to Matthew's agent, former NFL player Marcus Cromartie, he was verbally promised $100,000 to transfer to UNLV by an assistant coach. He also claimed that the school made no effort to formalize a contract and that when they did, they were only promised $3,000 for the 4 months the season takes place, and Sluka was also given a $3,000 relocation stipend, but to anyone that can do simple math, that's obviously way less than $100,000. On the other hand, UNLV says there were never any verbal commitments made at all. Blueprint Sports, who operates UNLV's NIL collective, confirmed the $3,000 relocation stipend and $3,000 a month contract negotiations, but were adamant that the $100,000 offer was never on the table. The UNLV athletic department then added that Sluka allegedly made demands for more money upon the school's NIL collective if they wanted him to keep playing. UNLV interpreted this as a violation of the NCAA's NIL rules, and they immediately turned him down, leading Sluka redshirt and sit out the rest of the season. Also, it is good to note that schools' NIL collectives aren't actually a part of the schools, but are acting on behalf of the schools and coaches. When broken down, it's a pretty simple situation. Sluka claims he was offered a certain amount of money, he doesn't get it, he redshirts and leaves. UNLV claims they gave him a different offer, they start winning, and he demands more money. This comes at a time where UNLV football is off to their best start in 40 years, started the season with some high quality wins, and in a position to put the college football world on notice. And to just have your starting quarterback up and leave due to money sucks from everybody's perspective. Say what you want about his play on the field, but they were rolling with him as a starter. But the focal point of this story comes with that $100,000 verbal offer. If this was somewhere on paper, it would be pretty easy to figure out and solve what went on and who was in the right and wrong, but because it was allegedly just a come here and we'll pay you all this money without a contract being involved, there's no way to really hold anybody accountable for this situation should the verbal offer have taken place. Now, Bob Sluka, Matthew Sluka's father, is standing 100% behind his son. He denies that they ever asked for more money and even went as far as to admitting that his family was paying for his housing out of pocket because UNLV never actually paid for Matthew's living expenses. He would go on to say that they were left understanding that they were going to get a certain dollar amount for Matthew to come there and play on the NIL deal, not a blowout number, but a reasonable number. He also added that Matthew had received 25 NIL offers from other schools, including SEC and Big Ten schools that were 4 and 5 times the amount of money that they were willing to take from UNLV. So according to the family's perspective, it sounded like he valued the program and the school over the money, where the NIL was cool, but his situation going into his first year of FBS football is what mattered the most. Now as he plans to transfer, it's going to be interesting to see how this story follows him to his next destination, and if this can all be solved in an amicable manner. So what type of precedent does this set for the rest of college sports? Because I'm almost positive that this isn't going to be the last of a situation like this. Currently, there's an ongoing antitrust lawsuit that allows the NCAA to let its school pay players directly. If the court approves a settlement, this new arrangement could provide greater security for both players and teams, enabling them to establish direct contracts and reduce the frequency of situations like Sluka's. However, if this doesn't end up going through, it could get ugly. Piecing the story together, let's assume Sluka is telling the truth. If he was in fact promised $100,000 and didn't receive it, I don't think there's many people that can blame him for what he did, especially when you put it in the context of a job. You're a 22-year-old kid who's probably not going pro, and you get one opportunity to play FBS college football and get paid 6 figures while doing it. That's a no-brainer for most people. But I also have to look at his agent and see what was going on there, because as an agent, you should have made it clear to your client that an assistant coach promising you $100,000 doesn't really mean much in the grand scheme of things. Even before NIL, coaches promise a lot that never come to fruition. Even just from a football perspective, whether it's playing time or starting spots, some coaches will tell you what you want to hear just to get you on their team. But when it comes to that amount of money in this era of college sports, a lot of stuff needs to happen for that to be set in stone. Obviously, you have to make a deal with the NIL collective, but his agent wasn't even registered in the state of Nevada where his client was playing, which was a problem in its own right. But on the other hand, if you are an assistant, you shouldn't be making monetary promises without going to the collective first anyway. That sets a bad precedent in its own right, as recruits could see that and use this situation to be skeptical when it comes to recruiting practices and promises made, not just by UNLV but by anyone. Anybody I know would call that a scam. There's currently nothing in place to hold schools accountable for getting over on its players, but I think a larger issue is that this should have been addressed a long time ago. The NIL era was going to get here eventually, but the call for college athletes to be paid in a way that is regulated and structured has been happening for years. In theory, it should work, but without any regulation, the current model probably isn't sustainable, but that's something to discuss for another day. So my opinion on the whole situation is that hopefully players in school can bypass the whole headache of NIL collectives and negotiate directly with each other, so then players in schools can know exactly what they're getting into. But just on a surface level, it doesn't look that great for Sluka. Without details of the situation, it just looks like he's quitting on his team, which is how a lot of people have been framing it, but I don't think that's the case. I'm always open to being wrong, but all this has more to do with the institution of college sports currently than the team itself. But whatever happens with this situation, I hope that the players can be compensated fairly, and if they fulfill their end of the bargain, be paid whatever they were promised, just like any other agreement. But for UNLV football, they look to keep it rolling with another FCS transfer quarterback, Malik Williams, as their starter. He looked really impressive in their first Mountain West game this year against Fresno State, putting up over 300 yards through the air and on the ground and adding 2 touchdowns in a 59-14 win. So far, so good post Sluka, and we'll see if they can keep this up and stay in the race atop the Mountain West. This is maybe the most interesting situation to come out of the NIL era of college sports so far, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how this develops in the future. But I hope you enjoyed this one, and let me know what you think about it in the comments. My name is Caleb. If you want to support the channel, please like and subscribe, and I'll catch you on the next one.